Welcome to the opening of the academic year 2022-2023. The procession of professors you just saw is one of our academic traditions. Our 180 years of history are the bedrock for the high-tech institution we are today. The pioneers of our past and present can lead us to a more sustainable future. In the here and now, that means marrying classic science to modern insight and creating actual solutions, says my granddad, who is Vice Rector Magnificus Rob Mudder. Let's hear it for Professor Mudder.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all of you here in the auditorium. Great to see so many people, and of course those joining online. And yes, that was the voice of my granddaughter, Sarah, you just heard. Of course, the younger generation is one of our main reasons for existing. But will she be studying at TU Delft one day? I'm a proud grandfather no matter what, but that would be a proud moment indeed. Many of you here today have already chosen to come to TU Delft. So now, I'd like to bid a special welcome to our first-year students. You are just starting out on your academic journey, and we are happy to have you here. Hopefully, you have spent the past few weeks acquainting yourself with TU Delft, the campus and the city, and all they have to offer. But no matter how well prepared you may now feel, going from high school to university is a big step, even under normal circumstances. Academically, socially, financially, emotionally, you enter a different world with new responsibilities, deadlines and commitments, as well as new distractions and temptations. Coming out of the pandemic makes starting at university perhaps an even bigger step. The good news is that we are now back on campus full-time, at the vibrant heart of our university. This is where it all happens. Here we meet and teach, and get inspired and feel connected. Coming to campus, taking part, meeting like-minded people, as well as completely different people. It is all an essential part of your educational experience. So I advise you to make most of everything our campus has to offer. For starters, this is your chance to work with the expert in your chosen discipline and to study your favorite topics with them. What an opportunity. Moreover, personal development is also very much part of education, and there is a lot to learn outside of lecture halls and classrooms as well. So do take part in sports and cultural activities, and in the vibrant student life in the city of Delft. But also remember, if you can't cope, or are feeling lonely, or encounter any other difficulties, we are here to help you. So, what can you expect from your time in Delft? First of all, we offer you strong foundations. Our heritage goes way back in time, to the mid-19th century. The Royal Academy, as we were then called, was founded in 1842. With 180 years of history, we are built on firm ground. Over that period, our researchers have enlarged the body of knowledge, and our graduates have produced impressive results, often very tangible ones, that can be seen not just on our campus, but all over the world. But our greatest heritage must be our graduates. By today, some 110,000 TU Delft alumni around the world are carrying on our engineering traditions and keeping up the good work. All this forms the bedrock for your education here. It all starts with us laying the foundations of science, design, and engineering, and of your knowledge and skills. We do that more rigorous than in secondary school. The piles, as it were, have to be driven in much deeper to support the edifice of your knowledge. Otherwise, you will find that later on in your studies and in your professional career, you run the risk of toppling over when you find yourself on shaky grounds. And remember, you cannot build on quicksand. Much of what we do here is grounded in the work of the generations before us. You follow in the footsteps of a long tradition of Delft engineers. I'm thinking of people like Jacobus van 't Hof, who won the first ever Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1901. Or Martinus Beyering, who led the foundation of modern microbiology and discovered viruses some 120 years ago. Or Elisabeth Corvuzet, who graduated a century ago and went on to become our first female professor and our first professor in theoretical chemistry. And there are many more. Your education will be built on the knowledge they created. That doesn't mean we are teaching you old hat stuff through outdated methods. While the basics remain largely the same, we continuously update our programs and teaching in line with our standing as a high-tech institution and with what is happening in the world around us. For example, a decade ago, we couldn't have foreseen how important things like cloud computing, virtual reality, big data, and artificial intelligence would become in the life of an engineer. But now, these are skills that every TU Delft graduate should have at some level. Under the surface, however, our assignment is unchanged. We are an institution of people dedicated to finding solutions. Hence, an important part of what you learn here is a mindset, a way of looking at problems and how to solve them. We are not just theorizing, but taking on actual challenges. Our predecessors worked to keep our feet dry. Nowadays, we face the challenge that we need to keep our feet dry, but not too dry. Sometimes we need to block the upcoming water. Sometimes we need to take it in and store it. Too much or too little water are therefore new challenges. And it's our task to take such a challenge on and come up with solutions that keep our world livable. And yes, there will require blood, sweat and tears every once in a while. But little is as satisfying as mastering something that is difficult. And that's what we do. Picking up the difficult challenges, as they are more interesting, and they're also the way to contribute to a better society. So, while the classical engineering attitude remains important, we do focus on what is needed in the here and now. For example, while our mission has always been to make the world a better place, the notion of what is better has changed. Our focus often lay on bigger, faster, and more. Nowadays, we know this is no longer sustainable. We must work on solutions that create a world that is fairer. We must find ways to deal with pollution and with shortages of raw material. And we must help bring the energy transition about. And most importantly, we must find ways of dealing or coping with climate change. And so, sustainability has become a vital aspect of what we do and what we teach. Based on the knowledge and experience won by past generations and pioneers, and on the insights and breakthrough of our present pioneers, we are working on a sustainable future. Past generations, however, are not only those pioneers of a bygone era. Generations of alumni out in the world form part of our TU Delft community. They form a vital bridge between our academic institution and the world of engineering practice and broader society. Based on their input and feedback, we know where the practical challenges lie and how we must develop our education to equip you to deal with those challenges. Conversely, we can supply them with the latest scientific insights. We hope that once you graduate, you will become part of that network spanning generations. If you remain part of our community, we can continue to help each other. In short, studying at TU Delft is no piece of cake, but it gives you a solid foundation for your future. What you learn here, you can pass on to the people you work with, or to your children, expanding and continuing our experience and network. That's why we say, TU Delft for life.
Wise words from Professor Mudder that can guide our first-year students, and all of us. And what about earlier generations of students? Looking back, what would they tell their younger selves, given the chance? And what is their advice to the next generation? Do all of them share the same experiences, and how do they feel about our common future? Let's get to know 3 generations of TU Delft.
Ja, want je oma je vertelde dat...
Er was geen campus.
Nee, er was geen campus.
Er was helemaal geen campus. Nee.
Ja, want welke gebouwen stonden er wel?
Nou, we hadden het oude hoofdgebouw op de oude Delft. Dat was schuin tegenover de club.
Oh. Ik heb wat meegenomen, dat is van opa. Collegekaarten van elk jaar en een werkstukje wat we moesten veilen. Ik hoorde dat het een hele moeilijke klus was geweest, maar hij heeft ook zijn letters en het jaar wat het gemaakt is, heeft hij erin gestempeld. Dat is uit 1951.
Wat er als eerste naar voren komt als herinnering is vooral de overgang van thuis wonen en de middelbare school en eigenlijk een behoorlijk beschermde omgeving naar deel worden van zo'n grote gemeenschap als de Technische Universiteit. Ik vond het enorm groot, maar vooral ook het op kamers wonen en verantwoordelijkheid krijgen. Ik begon aan een volgende fase in mijn leven. Als ik zo terugkijk, kan ik dat heel duidelijk zien.
Ik denk dat can-do ook wel een trait is die ingenieurs in het algemeen wil hebben, omdat je altijd wel iets nieuws te brengen of nieuws te maken. Dus dat is sowieso wel iets wat mensen met een technische achtergrond wel, denk ik, verbindt ook.
Ik ben de eerste in mijn familie die aan een universiteit studeert. Iedereen is best trots op mij dat ik dit doe en dit motiveert mij ook heel erg. Er wordt altijd gevraagd hoe het met mijn studie gaat, dus best wel leuk eigenlijk.
Ik ben in 50 gaan studeren en de dubbel helix is in 58 pas ontdekt. En nou ja, dus dat was heel interessant. En nou, toen kwam Puk, die zat te knippen aan die dubbel helix.
Het is wel heel bijzonder dat wat ik heb ervaren is dat ik altijd met al mijn vragen, ook tijdens mijn studietijd, nog tijdens mijn bachelor, van ik snap dit niet, met calculus bijvoorbeeld, dat ik dat kon vragen aan mijn vader of aan mijn moeder. En dat dat eigenlijk heel bijzonder is.
Doordat ik eindeloos bevraagd ben door mijn begeleiders, eigenlijk vooral om na te denken op allerlei niveaus. Dus dat al die niveaus een soort plek krijgen in een ontwerp. Terwijl het vak van architect zijn heb ik pas na mijn studie moeten leren op een architectenbureau. Maar ik heb hier echt leren denken vanuit allerlei invalshoeken en om dat op de een of andere manier bij elkaar te brengen. En ja, dat is volgens mij echt een grote waarde geweest.
In het begin van mijn studie ging ik eigenlijk alleen maar om met studenten met eenzelfde achtergrond als ik. Ging ik me niet heel veel mengen, maar die stap zetten was voor mij wel heel belangrijk. En dat heeft me echt heel erg geholpen, ontwikkeld op allerlei soorten gebieden.
Ik vond het heel leuk toen jullie besloten, eigenlijk allebei, om naar Delft te gaan. Ik was ook heel verrast. Ik dacht, oh wat leuk. Ja. Gewoon weer nieuwe mensen in Delft uit de familie. Ja, heel leuk.
Ja, en ik denk dat ik altijd een stukje Delft bij me hou, hoe ik denk over problemen, maar dus ook hoe je denkt over oplossingen. En dat in welke baan je ook zit of waar ik ook terecht kom, dat je altijd dat bij je houdt van oké, dit is een probleem, maar hoe gaan we dit dan oplossen? Ja.
It's great to witness the bond between generations. We need that kind of solidarity and commitment to tackle the challenges that lie before us. Solidarity between generations, between organisations, between town and university, between all of us. At TU Delft, we want to be a community for life that supports its members in providing solutions. And speaking of solutions, Dr. Yasmin Fadar has come up with an amazing one. Let's take a look.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor being here today to tell you about some of the cool research projects that we do in my lab. But first, I want to start with a story. I grew up in this beautiful town on the coastline of Turkey. And currently, I'm living in another beautiful town in the Netherlands. I love living here, but there is something that I am not particularly very happy about. which is being far away from my family. What is worst about being far away from your loved ones is that you have to share most of your memorable moments in digital. And frankly, I find those interactions very unnatural and even sometimes awkward. For example, I met my nephew for the first time in a Zoom call. And normally, in Turkish culture, when your sister-in-law has just given birth, you wouldn't just stand there and wave your hand saying, "Congratulations, hey Deniz, welcome to the world." For me, this is a very weird way of interacting with your family, but at that moment, this is all we could share. The next time I saw my nephew in the physical form, he was already 1 year old. I'm sure you all had similar kind of experiences, especially in the last 2 years during the COVID pandemic, right? So have you ever thought, why do we feel those digital interactions unnatural? What is the reason for that? Well, when we interact in the physical world to perceive our surroundings, we use our 5 senses. But unfortunately, that reduces to only 2 when we interact in the digital world. We only use our vision and hearing. And surprisingly, this situation hasn't been changed in the last 50 years since the invention of personal computers. And according to a recent study, the average time that a person spends in the digital world has increased to 8 hours in a day, which means that we have been spending approximately 1/3 of our life by only using our eyes and ears. I really don't like this situation, and I want to change that. I dream of a world where I can touch and feel the digital. I imagine that one day, when I speak with my nephew on that Zoom call, I will touch my computer screen, and I could feel his tiny, squishy, warm hands instead of a rigid and glass surface. So I have been chasing this dream for the last 9 years, and today I will share some of the things that I have learned and my vision on how to reach that goal. So how can we digitize tactile fields? Let's first think about how we digitize audio and visual data, the ones that we can already do. Imagine that you went to IKEA and saw this beautiful red carpet. You want to buy it, but before making a decision, you want to ask your partner's opinion who is at home, and probably who doesn't like red, like my husband. So what do? You grab your camera, take a picture with it, send it to them, and on the other end, they should have a device that they can visualize this image. So if we look at this process in a very, very simple form, we can see that it has 3 components. First, we should have a device, which is our camera, that can record the light as it comes to our sensing organ eye. And then we should have a way of storing this light in a compact way so that we can modify and share with the others. And finally, we should have another device that we can visualize this image. And this process is also very similar for the audio data. Instead of a camera, we have a microphone. Instead of a display, we have a speaker. And instead of a JPEG file, you have MP3, MP4 files. So if we follow the same process, can we also digitize tactile fields? Yes, we can. The current technology allows us to record the interactions that happens between our fingertip and the surface in the form of forces, and we can replay those forces using electrovibration displays. These devices can generate programmable friction and roughness on a flat touchscreen by modulating the frictional forces between our fingertip and the surface using electrostatic forces. So you might say, wow, that's cool. So we have a recording device, and we have a rendering device. Then why don't we have those devices integrated in our smartphones or computers? What is the problem? The problem lies in the middle. Unlike the audio and visual signals, tactile signals need physical interaction, and that changes everything. Because of our soft fingers, these interactions are nonlinear. So every time you touch a surface with a different force and speed, the generated forces will be different, and it will be different depending on your finger mechanical properties. All these nonlinearities are also valid for the rendering side, but on top of that, the electrostatic force generation principle of these displays is also nonlinear. So because of all these complexities that I will not talk a lot today, it is not very straightforward to instantly record a surface field and render it on a touch screen. So unfortunately, right now, we cannot just go to IKEA and record how this carpet feels and render it on your smartphone. But what I do, I record these interactions in my lab using sophisticated sensors and experimental equipment, and I do this for different textures and different interactions. Then I fit mathematical models that represent those interactions, and that also compensates all these nonlinearities, including the electrovibration display. I really like this methodology. You can definitely generate some natural sensations on touch screens. But there is something wrong with that one. Because if you remember the IKEA photo that I showed you, we didn't have only carpet there, right? We had the walls, we have the coffee table, we had the couch, and imagine how many web pages you scroll in a day, or how many objects you touch in a day. So if I want to use this methodology to digitize all the texture fields in the world, I should have a huge database. I will not say impossible, but I think this is a very infeasible way of digitizing texture fields. And even we had such database, right now we cannot modify these texture fields like we can do for images or sounds. What I'm trying to say is that right now, if you take a photo, for you it's very easy to modify how it looks by changing its brightness, sharpness, or contrast, because we know a lot about how the image parameters are related to our visual perception, but we don't know the same thing for our tactile perception. We don't know how these texture rendering parameters are related to our touch sense. So recently, I'm honored to get a Veni grant from NWO so that I can attack these challenges and invent a new texture modeling methodology that I can also incorporate human perception. So hopefully, if I can manage to do that, instead of having a huge database, I will have only one model that I will modify its parameters based on the fields that I want to generate. I cannot say how am I going to do that, because we have to apply a patent first, but I should say that I'm very excited to work on this project in the next 3 years. Because if I can do that, maybe one day, when you touch the surface of your smartphone, you can feel the walls of Collegium or surface of the Mars. But as you may notice, the examples that I give you are mostly rigid surfaces. Because unfortunately, these electrovibration displays can only modulate friction and roughness right now. So we are not at the stage of changing the deformability of a touch screen, changing its temperature, and changing its friction and roughness at the same time. Because remember, I want to feel the tiny, squishy, warm hands of my nephew, not only its friction and roughness. So we are not at the stage yet, but we are working on that. But in the meantime, we found another solution. With my former master's student, Bense, we invented a device that you can hold like a pen, and when you interact with a touch screen, you can also feel all these different tactile cues. And with my former bachelor students, we also designed another device that we can collect all these different tactile cues. So we call this recording device Field Scan, and we call the rendering device Field Pen. And currently, we are optimizing these devices and looking for different strategies to how to combine all these different tactile cues. And you can certainly collect how a baby skin feels and render it using Field Pen, but I think this is still a very unnatural way of interacting with the digital. So maybe in the meantime, we can use these devices for other kind of applications. For example, rendering the feel of fabric of the clothes that you would like to purchase online. So all the projects that I have told you have some kind of touchscreen interaction is involved. Because currently, touch screens are an indispensable part of our lives, but it may not be like that. Maybe in the future, every object around us will be part of a computer. Especially with the advancements in augmented reality or virtual reality technologies, we think that this future is very close. So because of that, with my former postdoc, Becca, we worked on a wearable device that you can wear like a ring, and that can give you different vibration fields. What is nice about with this device is that you don't have to occlude your fingertip so that you can also interact with the physical objects around you and feel them. And we also made a new texture modeling methodology that we can augment different texture fields when you interact with different objects. Currently, we can render very simple surfaces like bombs or periodical ones, but we think that in the future, we can expand it even for complex surfaces. Like when you interact with a flat wall, maybe you can feel the brush strokes of Van Gogh on his Starry Night painting. As I said, I dream of a world where I can touch and feel the digital, and every day, my team and I are working towards for this dream. And I believe that the day that I will talk with my nephew and touch my computer screen and feel his hands is not that far away. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Dr. Veder's work exemplifies our motto. We don't just want to be good at what we do, but what we do should also be good for something. And our little change of pace, because if there's one thing that's good for all of us, it's music. Local band Duct Tape is going to put the party in this event. So let's see who can stay stuck to their seats. Take it away, Duct Tape.
Always late. Anytime she has a date, but I love him. Yes, I love him. Is you is or is you ain't my baby. The way you acted lately makes me doubt. Baby. words you can tell. It makes a special brew, put fire inside of you. Anytime you feel a danger or fear, and instantly I will appear. I'm every woman. I'm every woman. I'm every woman. I'm every woman.
Wow, what a contribution! At TU Delft, we want to make a contribution to solving societal problems. And the best way to do that, we know, is to combine disciplines and viewpoints, to break down barriers between fields and institutions. That is exactly what TU Delft's Wouter Surgeon and Christos Stridis of the Erasmus Medical Centre are doing.
Kalispera, Christo.
Oh, goedemiddag, Wouter.
Wow, that music of duct tape was amazing. It still sticks in my brain. It's amazing what it does there in my brain. Rhythm, melody, beats, the licks, feel, breaks, movement, associations, memories, emotions. So the coming 15 minutes, we will be talking about the brain. Some say that we only use 10% of our brain and its capacity. Maybe you remember this movie. This is the movie from 2015 called Lucy. The lead role was for Scarlett Johansson as Lucy, and there was also an excellent role of Morgan Freeman as Professor Norman. And in there, it was suggested that if you could unleash the other 90% of our brain, we would have more brain power, more memory, better learning, better understanding. Let's do that. On the other hand, it's not correct.
No. Well, some also say that actually we have two hemispheres in the brain, and the left one is the Spock from Star Trek, the analytic mind, and the right hemisphere is the Picasso, the artistic part. But that's also very simplistic. That's not exactly correct. There is a lot more to our brain than popular science.
First, some numbers. In the human brain, there are more than 86 billion neurons. That's a bit more than 10 times the number of people on our planet. And these neurons, they have on average between 1,000 and 10,000 connections to other neurons. Well, that's on average more connections than we all have on LinkedIn. In total, the brain forms a whopping 65 trillion connections in total. That is 65 followed by 12 zeros, a staggering number.
Right. But don't make after this number, don't make the mistake to think that the brain is a big blob of neurons. As a matter of fact, it's a very unique organ, very inhomogeneous in structure, and with unique plasticity, the highest one we know in the universe. As an example, we have the cerebellum, which is a Latin word for the little brain. And it's responsible for all, it's a large switching network system, and it's responsible for all our motor tasks and a lot of everyday activities we do without realizing. So listening to music, as we just did, learning to play music, having rhythm, playing football, even holding a cup of coffee without spilling it on your nice jacket, are all because of the cerebellum. And all this actually is packed in a whopping 69 billion neurons. This makes, if you paid attention to the previous slide, this makes about 8% of all the neurons in the brain. So there is a lot of diversification inside it.
It is also important to note that the functions executed by the brain can be very complex. For instance, what we see here, this is the visual cortex. So the visual cortex is basically the behind you, in the backside of your brain. And that is the part that receives, integrates, and processes visual information. It has only 4 to 8 billion neurons, but it needs 7 layers of image and video processing before we can really see. In the layer of the visual cortex called V1, the first layer, there's a correspondent like pixels on an image. So we call them phosphenes. So if you see a pixel, then you trigger a phosphene in your brain. However, the other layers, for instance, physics, that is much more complex. It is focused on transitions, on detection of motion, of visual stimuli, and it acts as a real motion detector. If neurons are the building blocks of the brain, what is so special about them? Well, neurons are miniature computers. They're complex chemical factories and also information messengers. They use electrical and chemical signals to transmit information across the brain and even across the entire body. Everything we feel, think, and do would be impossible without the work of neurons. So what does a neuron look like? Well, here you can see a diagram. There are 3 basic parts. There's a cell body, and there are two types of extensions called the axon and the dendrite. The cell body, that you see at left, the soma, there's a nucleus that controls the cell's activities and contains the cell's genetic material. But the real thing is happening with the dendrites and the axon. The dendrites, they look like the branches of the tree, and you can see that on the left side of the neuron, and they receive messages from other cells, from adjacent cells. And the neurons then process that information, and they communicate it along the axon, the long tail, and then they transmit it to other cells. Neurons communicate with each other by sending chemicals called neurotransmitters across a tiny space called the synaptic cleft, and that is between the axons and the dendrite of adjacent neurons. So that's what you see on the right side. And the adjacent neuron here is in orange. And depending on the type of neurotransmitter that is being released by the left neuron, and into the synapse, the cleft between the 2 neurons, the sensitivity of the receiving neuron is being modulated. And it can be in 2 ways. For instance, if the neurotransmitter that is being released is glutamate, then it has an excitatory effect, meaning that basically you make the adjacent neuron more likely to fire electrically, and then it generates an action potential. However, if the neurotransmitter that is released is GABA, then it has an inhibitory effect. So then that receiving neuron is less likely to generate an action potential.
And so this is an incredible mechanism. Every single neuron out of these billions we have in our brains is a shocking machine. Be that as it may, what we think nowadays is that the emergent properties of the brain that makes us who we are actually relying mostly on the interactions of those neurons. millions and billions of interactions between those neurons, what is known in modern science as network dynamics. Here you can see a picture from a technology called tensor diffusion imaging. And this image is actually from a living, breathing human being. He's awake. And it's coming from a very famous project. You probably heard it. It's called the Human Connectome Project. And what it shows you is this dynamic interactions, the chatter between the neurons in our brain that happen every single second of our existence. And
what if it goes wrong? What about epilepsy?
Yeah, and so because of this very complicated interactions, which is a very beautiful phenomenon, of course, when we have certain diseases in the brain, we have also complex ways that this system can break. Here's an example, a very prominent example is epilepsy. It's a network phenomenon which basically happens when multiple neurons in different locations in the brain, so it's not only one region, as you can see in this picture, so the multiple locations of multiple neurons in different parts of the brain are activating at the same time. So we have this synchronous effect happening to the point that the brain is driven into, it gets into an overdrive. If you actually see an MRI scan, a live MRI scan of a person getting into a seizure, it is akin to a wildfire spreading through a forest. And you can see this in this small animation, while healthy neurons are firing at a regular pace beyond a certain point when epilepsy ensues. See, start seeing this rapid firing of neurons. So this situation, this condition, of course, you can imagine that it causes neurons to degrade and even die. So it's a very discomforting, in certain cases painful, and in also certain rare cases, it can also, a situation can also lead to death. Besides that, you can imagine a person with epilepsy cannot function normally in the general case in a society. So it's a huge personal but also societal problem that we have to deal with.
Epilepsy is affected by genetics and the environment. It's very patient-specific, and it's transient in nature, all of which make it a tough problem to crack. But before we are able to tackle it, we first need to understand it better. And how do we do that? Well, the golden standard is to use EEG, short for electroencephalography. Basically, what we do by this kind of bathing cap, and we make a connection with the outer side of the brain, the scalp, and there are metal discs on top of it, and you can see them there. They are connected to wires. And there we do an electro-recording of the brain. And this is how we can detect the epileptic phenomena, and maybe also where it originates from. But despite that it is the golden standard, EEG can only capture electrical patterns, and only with very crude accuracy.
We're living in an era that new technologies are becoming available to us. The goal is to try to achieve, because of what I just mentioned about the dynamic phenomena in the brain, our goal is to try to capture this dynamic phenomena at the highest possible, what we call spatio-temporal resolution, right? So that we are able to understand what's happening. One of these technologies we have the pleasure and the honor of developing together here at TU Delft, together with Erasmus Medical Center. It's called functional ultrasound imaging. And the basic technology is similar to the sonograms that pregnant women have to image their babies during pregnancy, during labor. On the left, you can see there is a probe, right? And we scan an awake patient. And on the right, you can see a live picture, video, I should say, of thousands of microvessels transferring blood across. Now, why is this very important to us? Because we know that blood flow is very strongly coupled to neural activity on the same region of the brain. So by visualizing at that level of detail in space and time the blood flow, we can make very strong deductions about the neural activity or lack thereof in that part of the brain.
And indeed. And then how can we start treating them? Well, clearly epilepsy is a network phenomenon in which many neurons that wire together also fire together. So in order to go for treatment, we need to reliably detect the onset of an epileptic insult. So we need to record at multiple sites simultaneously. And this can, for instance, be done by a flexible cortical implant, like the one we see here and we have developed here in Delft together with Fraunhofer. Electrodes made out of gold span multiple regions of the cortex, so the outer side of the brain, and they route their signals via insulated golden tracks to a chip in the middle of the implant. This chip processes these signals and detects the location, the type and severity of the epileptic seizure. However, as you can see, it is still quite a large implant. Because of that, the surgical implant procedure can become very, very complicated.
So, right. So, stands to reason that if we're trying to capture and record as large an area of the brain as possible to understand what's happening, it's symmetric. It's let's say, analogous that we should try to perturb the brain in a network fashion as well, right? Remember what we said about epilepsy? It's a wildfire, right? Occurring at the same time, different parts of the brain. Makes it extremely difficult to handle across humans. So one of the approaches we're exploring, is to actually implant, to sort of spray the brain with a cluster of very tiny implants that are able to communicate with each other, and depending on the particular epilepsy pattern, the way it manifests, they are coordinating a stimulation strategy, and then they're firing in a synchronous fashion to stop it in its tracks.
Or we might get lucky and find a single sweet spot from which we can suppress epileptic seizures without the need for a network, wherever they might occur in the brain. And a suggested stimulation site could be, for instance, the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is so named for the Latin word wanderer. Vagus means wanderer. It's the longest cranial nerve that wanders through our body. It's the information highway between the brain and the internal organs, like the gut, the spleen, the heart, the lungs, the pancreas, etc. And with 80% of its fibers, it directly communicates to the brainstem, the central part of our brain. In the neck, it passes right under the skin, so it is very close by and it's easy to interact with. Of course, the vagus nerve can be stimulated electrically, but it's not very spatially selective, so we do not really know which nerve fiber inside the bundle we will target. So a better option might be to use focused ultrasound, as being investigated by my colleague Tiago Costa. So then it becomes a smart patch. Well, all of this is happening right now and requires groundbreaking research, which we do here in Delft and with our partners in the medical delta. As real breakthroughs in medical technology can only happen with your help, dear freshmen, dear students, dear colleagues, and dear alumni.
For life.
For quality of life.
Today, we could only show you a few of the great things that go on at TU Delft. Our campus and our community are full of people like Yasmin, Wouter, and Christos. They are dreaming big and changing the world for the better through science and engineering, all to fulfill our mission of creating impact for a better society. We want you, our first-year students, and all of you out there today, to be part of that community, to make lasting connections, so together we can be a creative force for good.
180 years is a lot of history, but also a big responsibility. We owe it to ourselves to keep making an impact on the world around us. We want to be a force for good, and our students and graduates are by far our biggest impact.
This is where the magic happens. Our campus. Here we teach and we learn, we invent and we innovate. It's all about the meeting of minds, exchanging ideas, working together. And about keeping an open mind to other angles and approaches. Diversity can drive innovation.
Every year we welcome people from all over the world. And so many of our graduates end up in an international setting. Just imagine the network of shared knowledge and experiences that creates. Like one huge family spanning the globe. It is important we do the right things and we do them right. It's also important to do well on a personal level. So we should treat each other with respect. And we should all feel safe on campus. This year, the Delft Student Associations have initiated the campaign Are You OK? We strongly support this.
Making an impact starts at home, on our campus. Together with a wider community, we set our innovations on the path to application in living labs.
In fact, our whole campus is a living lab in our quest to become carbon neutral by 2030.
At TU Delft, we all share a dream. We want to make the world a better place. It's as simple and as complex as that. And of course, we can't do that by ourselves. We need all of you. All of us together are TU Delft. That makes me proud beyond words.
Those who leave TU Delft always take something with them. A piece of blue in their hearts, reminding them of their time here. They will always be part of our community. That's why we say, TU Delft for life. I think this was a great portrayal of our TU Delft community. But it also brings us to the end of our academic ceremony. I hope it will lay many foundations for us to continue the work and act upon. For our new students, as an incentive to put their shoulders to the wheel and start as they mean to go on. But also to feel welcome and supported and safe. For our senior students and our colleagues, as an incentive to kick off the new academic year with vigor, creativity and passion. But also to feel needed and supported and safe. And for everyone here today and our wider community, as an invitation to keep taking part in this wide and wonderful network. We couldn't do it without any of you. So, thank you for being here today. But our afternoon is not quite over yet. If you can, please come and have a drink with us at the reception in the foyer on the first floor. There you will be able to meet and greet today's speakers. However, I would like you to remain standing for a moment until the cortege has left the hall via the stage. Then please all leave the hall via the south side. And now, I declare the academic year 2022-2023 open.